So far, you've seen that when we send this post request in our controller, have a look. So our Kafka template takes the key as a string and the value as a string. And then here we send just the message. But let's say that you want to send a custom object. So how do you do that? So instead of just a string, you want to send the object as a whole. So let's open a project, and in here, let's create a new class, and I'm going to name this as message, and this will be a record. And inside of this message, let's just have the string and then message, and also the local date and then time. And I'm going to say created at. So put this on a new line, just like that. So you can see that now we do have the message here, as well as the local date created at. So inside of our controller now, we basically want to convert that message request, so this message request, into the message. So here, let's just say new message, and let's pass the message from the request, and then the timestamp, so local date, and then now. So let me extract this to a variable, and this is now the message that we want to send. But obviously, if I try to send a message here, so message, you can see that I can't, because the value has to be a string. So let's change both the consumer and producer so that we can work with objects. So let's open up the producer first, Kafka producer config, and inside of this class, we have to change a couple of things. One is the producer config value serializer class. This no longer is the string serializer, and instead it has to be, so in here, let me just change this to JSON and then serializer. And this comes from the Spring framework, not the one from Jackson. So there we go. The next thing, so in here for the producer factory, this has to be a message, just like that. Let me copy this and do the same for our Kafka template, right? So we want to send our message in here, and when we inject the producer factory, we need this one, right? So it's string and then message. So let's just reflect in here, string and then message. And this is all for this class. Next, let's open up the consumer config. And in here, we have to do a couple of things. So what we need to do in a nutshell is we need to change the consumer factory as well as the Kafka listener container. So here, the type will be message. And what I'm going to do is so here we can actually pass some extra arguments. I'm going to say comma, and then have a look. So deserializer as well as value deserializer. So what I want for this guy right here is to have the key as a string. So string and then deserializer. And this should be new, just like that. And then invoke the constructor and then comma. And also you can see that we can pass the deserializer value. So the value will be new. And then I can say JSON deserializer. So the same thing that we've done for the producer, just like that. And in here, we can actually remove this. So let's just remove from this config. And we only have the Bootstrap servers in here. So now we also have to change the factory. So Kafka listener container factory. So here, this has to be a message. And when we inject the consumer factory, which is this guy right here, it's no longer a string, but a message. The same for the concurrent Kafka listener container factory. So this has to be a message. And there we go. Now, obviously, if I open up the controller now, we have to change the template because, so have a look. So when we configured the producer, we configured Kafka template in here. So the key is a string and the value is a message. So let's just change this. So back to our controller. So this has to be a message. The same here. And now in here, we can just pass our message. So I'm going to say message. There we go. And I think within the main, so Kafka application in here, let's also change this because otherwise it will fail. So this has to be message. And then here, let's just basically take this string right here. And I'm going to say new and then message. And I'm going to pass the message, comma, and then local date, and then now. And let me just put this on a new line so it's easy to read. And also let me just indent things properly. And now you can see that it's easy for you to read. Obviously my font is quite big and usually I wouldn't have this kind of formatting. So now we are good to go. So before, remember, so when we ran, we had listener received hello Kafka, but this was a string. So now let's just take this right here. So I'm going to hide. And if I restart the application and check this out. So now we are sending a JSON object. So have a look. So all of these, so they're about 1,000 or 100 actually, I think. So that's what we had in our loop. Yes, 100 in here. So we have 100 messages right here. And you can see that they are in form of an object. Now, we're not quite there yet, but you can see that this is kind of working, right? So our producers, so here we are basically sending a message, and also the controller is sending this message, which is an object. If I open up run, and in here, let me just put this a bit smaller, go to the top and just delete all of that and open up my HTTP client, and let's run this request right here. So HTTP localhost API v1 messages, and this is the payload. Have a look. This is the payload, which is the entire object. If I say run, and now let me just go back to run again and have a look. So this is our message. So if I say hello John, for example, and send, go to run, and you can see that this is working. Now this is not quite there yet. And this is because if I hide this and open up the listener, so let's just open up the listeners, so here, and have a look. So in here, our listener accepts a string right here, and then it basically prints the string. But what we want is to change this from a string to a message, which is our Java object that we've just created. So let's tackle that next.